Sophie, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
I'm pretty good, all things considered right now, I guess. Thanks for having me, Harry. I appreciate it, and it's always good to discuss this experience, I guess.
For sure, for sure. So I actually had a few people who reached out who suggested to get you on the podcast. For those who don't know, and I'll let you go into it in a little bit more detail. You're very
Mm-hmm.
heavily involved in Berlin Buyers Club, which obviously are very much involved in promoting advocacy in quite an out there kind of way that's really getting eyeballs on the condition, and I'm sure you'll go into that a little bit more. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, very very excited to chat to you today. I think we're going to cover a lot of ground from your experience
Mm-hmm.
to where you're up to at the moment, and also very much touch upon the advocacy side of things as well for us to have a little discussion about that. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting content there as well. So
Yeah.
welcome, and I thought we could maybe start off with a little bit about you. And yeah, why are you involved in long COVID, unfortunately?
Unfortunately, yeah. So I had my first COVID infection I tested positive, I should say, on January 10th, 2023. That was around when I think the XBB variant was prominent. There was a lot of discussion about COVID becoming very mild, that you basically didn't have to worry anymore, that it was essentially like a cold. Even I would say some voices from the long COVID community, unfortunately, had suggested that the latest variants are gentler. Perhaps in some ways they statistically are, I don't know. But that certainly doesn't, eliminate individual risk. And for me, my infection was really, really bad. I got extremely sick. It's the most intense acute disease from an infection I've ever had. I've had plenty of other infections. I even actually had myocarditis from another virus when I was 18 years old, which is quite a long time ago now. But yeah, that was asymptomatic actually, the infection that caused it. So I've never been so sick actually from an infection. Within 5 weeks, I would say I was definitely not recovering the way other people I know had recovered. I know a lot of people who got quite sick from COVID, but fortunately they recovered. I didn't. It was like 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks. I tried to go back to work. I was exhausted. I had to work in bed on my laptop, just like trying to
Mm.
type, but I had to have, so I'm a designer, I'm a professional designer, so looking at screens is crucial for my work, unfortunately. So I'd have my laptop screen, like the brightness set all the way to the bottom because I'm sure you're aware of this too. I had really extreme light sensitivity at this point. I think a lot of us have had that actually. So I couldn't look at the screen properly. People looked derealized. My job was as a senior designer, so that included having meetings all the time. I couldn't focus. Every second was like my brain was screaming at me, like, I can't do this, I can't do this, I'm exhausted, I'm exhausted, I'm exhausted. Like, that was just the feeling. And within 2 days of trying to work again, I remember like going from my bed to lying on the floor because I was just so overwhelmed with such intense feelings of illness, like intense nausea, malaise, exhaustion, like crippling exhaustion. And I was like, this isn't normal. Like
Mm.
this, I think, and that's when I started thinking maybe I'm going to develop long COVID. I had looked a little bit and knew that you couldn't get an official diagnosis until it had been going on for at least 3 months. But even I was 5 weeks out and I was still so unbelievably unwell. I, at that point, just couldn't foresee how I would be like 100% in another 8 weeks or whatever it was. And that just made me think, why is this not discussed? Because pretty quickly, I've always been kind of an oversharer on social media, if that's what you want to call it. Like I've been blogging since I was 14 years old. I'm 33 now, so it's been a very long time. I've just always shared things that are happening to me because I like to connect with others and talk about topics that are perhaps a little bit more taboo to speak about openly, just to make things like remove stigma from topics and be more open about things, I guess. So I was sharing and talking about it, and very quickly connected with a lot of other people, also people who aren't considered old, you know, people in their early 20s, in their early 30s. And I very quickly discovered there were a lot of other people struggling with this. Even people, you know, people were contacting me who had become sick like 3 weeks after I did, and they were seriously struggling too. And there was a similar theme amongst everyone, and that theme was disbelief and shock. Like, why is this happening to me? How is this happening to me? How is this even possible when the overwhelming public messaging has been, you know, it's fine now. If you're relatively healthy, it's going to be okay. So that just made me feel angry, I guess. And I was looking around at I immediately thought I need to do something about this. I don't know why. I just felt like I can't be stuck like this forever. So I immediately felt like I have to do something about this. I also thought about a former colleague who I'm aware has had severe ME/CFS for 9 years now, I think. And when I was reading more and connected the dots between long COVID and ME/CFS, I just thought, oh, we have to do something about this. I'm a designer. I'm not a scientist. I've mentioned this several times, like on my Instagram as well. I'm not a researcher. I'm not an analyst. I'm a designer. So what can I offer? I can offer things that look cute. I think design has the power to make unpopular topics, especially politically unpopular and divisive topics, more appealing, less perhaps weird, and less like I was just trying to make the topic more approachable, I suppose, through some kind of pathway. So I
And a
thought,
sense of agency for you, a sense of
yeah,
agency for you as well, because there's the many people who maybe, like you say, don't necessarily have the skills around research, looking into the actual illness and the science behind it, but there is ways that you can have that agency for you to make that kind of impact in whatever field that might be.
exactly. And I live in Berlin. We have, like, I would say, a pretty big stickering culture, if you want to call it here.
Yeah.
You walk through the streets, there's stickers everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm a designer, so I appreciate them. And if there's a sticker that looks kind of cute, I used to stop and look at them. And I was just thinking, you know, sometimes the stickers are there for months. And I was just thinking, I also have a lot of friends in Berlin a lot of people move here because we have, for example, a pretty famous nightlife. Some people describe it as an adult's playground. And there's a very youthful, progressive energy here as well. And I felt like I could tap into that and perhaps even get my friends who don't have long COVID, who otherwise wouldn't be particularly interested in the topic, to get them to just reconsider it and think about it, and even introduce them to what ME/CFS is by making the whole topic just seem a bit more relatable to them somehow. And I'm happy to say that it's worked. Literally yesterday, a friend I haven't seen for about over a year now DM'd me and was like, hey, I just wanted to say all your work and posts about long COVID have really made me reconsider, and I've started masking in some crowded public places again, which I would say I see that as a success. And I've had several people approach me like that. So it's nice that they're then willing to help us advocate or even do things like mask in places where they could be in contact with other vulnerable people who are more susceptible to infections. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm aiming to do, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's very frustrating because you obviously talk about the infection in 2023, and it is very frustrating how that lack of like awareness and kind of urgency. I think there has been maybe a little bit more awareness of what like long COVID is over the last 3 or 4 years. I think there is more people who are actually aware of it. I think doctors are more aware of it. People in general are aware that it is a thing that can occur as a result. But I
Yeah.
do still think, like you said, that there's that they're not that full awareness of the risk, right? I think especially,
Mm-hmm.
amongst young people, and I've had a similar thing with people reaching out and saying, hey, you've obviously got different levels of severity, right? You've got some people who, like you said, having 9 years of MECFS, but then even people who are reaching out and saying, do you know what, I had this weird fog ever since I've had my COVID infection. I've had this weird kind of fatigue, and it's not crippled me, but I just haven't been able to live quite how I wanted to, or how am I hoping to. And seeing your stuff, or seeing the information about it, made me think, okay, maybe there is some kind of relation. And I think there still is that lack of awareness of the severity there. So
Mm-hmm.
in terms of your work then at Berlin Buyers Club, so I think people can see you're repping some of the merch in your t-shirt as well at the moment. What is your guys' aim with that? Like, what exactly are you trying to do? So is it awareness? Is it about changing people's behaviors? Is it about trying to force political change? What exactly are you guys focusing in on, and what it is that you do?
All of the above. I would say trying to, in general, raise public awareness. My entry, or the way I personally see it, is through a focus on youth culture. I've noticed that Berlin Buyers Club seems like it appeals to all ages. I have people contacting me who very kindly, and I appreciate everyone's support, so much, by the way, from all age groups, all corners of the globe, which is incredible. But I guess when I started to design it and started to think of the concept, when I started, I was still very, very sick. So
Hmm.
first designs were also incredibly simple. But I was thinking about it from more of a youth lens. I think the way a lot of movements build is often through youth culture. That's how I see it anyway. So yeah, it's kind of like trying to, I mean, it's a big, big, big goal, but it's almost like I'm trying to build some kind of cultural phenomenon where my hope is that there's an awareness that builds through this in youth culture, which then translates to culture at large, I suppose.
Hmm.
That's the goal. And then with that kind of building awareness, the hope is that we have more support that helps us to build more public pressure on
Yeah.
politics, on society at large, on corporate. For example, like I've shared my story to LinkedIn now as well, which was scary because LinkedIn low key terrifies me. But that already helped me connect with some people there. It's just trying to spread this message in all corners of society, focused on youth culture primarily, I
Hmm.
suppose. And that energy, the anger, the rawness, the aesthetics, it's just about trying to build a movement. And yeah, now we're trying to register Berlin Buyers Club as a nonprofit officially. So my hope is that then I could um, direct some of the merch income towards research, hopefully with input from patients, because I think you're probably aware too, like in the US, for example, some of the research money was wasted on things that I don't think they should have spent the money on personally, but yeah, it's just trying to raise awareness, maybe adjust some behavior, or just even trigger that thought that maybe I should, maybe I should have never stopped masking in medical clinics, for example, to get people to start thinking like that a little bit, and to develop genuine empathy for people going through this, because it's truly, I think, especially people who are dealing with severe MECFS from before the pandemic or through long COVID, I think we can all agree that that's undoubtedly one of the worst things any human could go through.
Yeah. Yeah. So a grassroots movement, essentially, for trying to drive political activism and political change. I,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm guessing as well that the overall goal with all of this stuff is to at the end of the day, we want solutions, right? So that the goal is to try and find solutions, fund research, etc. Is that the kind of, you're trying to go down the route of trying to make people aware of the level and severity of suffering of some of these individuals, and then drive that kind of empathetic route to try and drive more money in, whether it be through charity, whether it be through political funding, or also highlight the economic impact and things like this? Because I think this is quite an interesting area as well, this kind of deliberation between empathy and highlighting financial impact, because this is something I've talked about a bit, because I feel like certainly from the grassroots level, you engage more people individually from the kind of empathetic point of view, and they see people who are suffering, they're like, oh god, that's, that pulls at the heartstrings. But maybe on a higher level, in terms of governmental funding and political change, the empathy and sympathy only goes so far. And there needs to be also that element of look, this is going to impact GDP or number of people out of work, etc. And it feels a little cold. It feels a little unpleasant to talk like that. But quite often, certainly in the UK, I feel like the only way that you sometimes see that kind of political change is when the numbers don't lie, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think politically, for sure, there has to be a consideration of how this is impacting economies, which it already is. Last year, I believe, Germany's recession in one of the quarters, it's been a while since I read this. I'm definitely not picking it up. I just don't know if I'm quoting it exactly, but I believe Germany's economy in one of the quarters went into a recession because there was so much sick leave.
Yeah.
We have
Doesn't surprise me.
Records of sick leave in this country. That insurance, that has to be paid out. I think some health insurance are trying to kick people off Krankengeld, which translates to sick money. It's like the payment you get if you're on long-term sick leave here. It's definitely having an impact, and I think bringing that up is really important. Berlin Buyers Club, with the help of some other affected long haulers, we actually had our first demonstration, like public in real life demonstration, on Friday. It was very, very spontaneous. Like, I uploaded the visuals 11 days before the demo. It was on a Friday afternoon. It was 31 degrees Celsius. Any Americans who are watching, that's pretty hot in Berlin, and we're sick. People who have dysautonomia and ME/CFS, they often struggle to regulate temperatures as well, I felt pretty sick on the day, but over 60 people rocked up on pretty short notice, which was really encouraging. And we have sent a petition to the Bundestag for approval and hope that gets approved. If we get 30,000 signatures, they have to officially invite us to speak to them. And if that, fingers crossed, somehow happens, I, anyway, would definitely be bringing up all these facts. But I think some of the politicians are already aware. There is resistance to really give it the urgency it deserves, though. And I think a lot of that reasoning is obviously political. COVID in general has unfortunately become a very politically divisive topic.
For sure. It's tricky, isn't it? Because that political change will only get attention when these kind of, like, I think you need that grassroots stuff. You need that kind of anger and that frustration and that the desire for change within people. But then, like you're saying, it's difficult to, at the top level, to really push it as well. But we see a similar thing in the UK as well. If you look at the long-term sickness trends, you see, obviously, as you would expect, a massive spike after COVID. And there's plenty of analysis suggesting, maybe this is due to people working from home and having chronic back pain or something like this. It's like, okay, yeah,
hilarious.
definitely the case. But I totally agree. I think you need that kind of double pronged approach. And so you guys, what you're doing is through the merch as well, and the stuff that you guys are purporting is obviously raising money, but then also getting the word and messaging out there through the stickers and through the stuff that you guys are wearing as well, right?
Exactly. And just, I think it gives people who are affected, like you said, it gives me a bit of a sense of agency. it's basically like the only purpose I have right now. I'm lucky that I have improved a lot since the very beginning. Like at the very, very beginning when I had COVID, I was lucky that I never developed into a severe baseline, and that might be because, this happened to me in 2023, and I would say the information is not like super out there in the mainstream, at least not back then, but it didn't take you long to find it. At least I don't
Yeah.
think it would have taken, and I think it was a very different landscape to what it would have been like for people, certainly with pre-pandemic MECFS. I've heard a lot of stories, and the gaslighting and wrong advice people would get was horrendous, and that led to deterioration for a lot of people, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And people who were affected by this in the first wave of COVID had a similar experience. I would say they were lucky that there were people with pre-pandemic ME/CFS warning them. But I think I'm kind of a nerd, so I know how to Google, I guess. I know what to search for, and I found I would say, decent information pretty quickly, which, I'm not saying I did it perfectly, but I pretty quickly learned about pacing and not, forcing yourself to be active when your body was clearly telling you, like, no, 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 no. Because I've definitely pushed through feeling a bit sick throughout my life before, but this is a different level, and you should respect those warnings, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
especially at the beginning. So I'm lucky I never settled into a severe baseline or anything. But I think I've lost my point. Brain fog. Sorry. What was I saying?
About the pacing and ensuring that you're not overdoing it when it initially comes up. And I think there is that information out there if you know where to look for it now, and I think it is a lot better. But like you said, that needs to be more integrated within the healthcare system. Like, for example, when I first became ill, unfortunately, I essentially was kind of told, like I was saying to you earlier, it was sort of deconditioning. I'd suddenly gone from training full time to being unable to do my teeth and stuff, and they're like, yeah, probably deconditioning. I'm like, yeah, definitely the case. But because I was unaware, and I thought maybe this is just anxiety or just me having a down day, I did push through, and there wasn't that fixed prescription of what you need to do following an infection like this. But even now, there isn't that level of information that is systematized within the system. So I think I think that needs to be better. No, for sure. Okay, so I think if we could talk about advocacy, because I think we've both been doing forms of advocacy, and actually when I reached out to you, I think you sent me a very candid email back, which I really appreciated, saying that you obviously appreciate the elements of advocacy that I'm doing, but that you think we have a rather different perspective when it comes to different aspects of that. Certainly around the maybe recovery stories and brain training and all of these kind of things as well. So I'd love to go over and have a discussion about that, about the differences that you see in kind of what we're doing, but then also the commonalities as well, that common ground where, because I do think we have the same North Star, right? Which is that we want to help people, we want to see people getting better, and we want to see more money getting into long COVID research.
Yeah, I think I hope we definitely both want medicine to kind of take the next step to, I don't know, some kind of, how should I phrase this? I think a problem like long COVID and ME/CFS will only genuinely be solved, for example, through personalized medicine for everyone, not just extremely privileged people. I think that this is also me talking about big ambitions right now, but I think a lot of things, even fundamentally, have to be adjusted for the healthcare system to deal with something like this. I don't want to call it unprecedented, because ME/CFS has already existed for a long, long, long time and it was neglected. But I suppose having this exponential growth of cases thanks to the pandemic was kind of unprecedented. But really, there would be a capacity for something like this to happen with any pandemic, I suppose. because ME/CFS can be triggered by a lot of different infections,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
for sure. Bacterial, the flu, a variety of different stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm glad we're both on the same page in terms of, pushing for solutions. I think sometimes we differ in terms of how we're discussing the overall topic. I'm not the biggest fan of brain retraining in terms of how it's framed regarding long COVID and ME/CFS. Perhaps because I was already doing a lot of these things before I got sick. Even in preparation for our interview, I went and purchased the book that was, I can't believe I did this because it's kind of against what I stand for, but I'm also just a curious person. So I purchased the book that was written by the people who run the SOMIA International Program, I think it's called, former CFS school.
Okay.
And I started reading it, and a lot of these theories I already knew, and I was already doing a lot of it actually. I before I got COVID, I was doing yoga every single day. I was regularly doing meditating. I've used a lot of these brain retraining techniques. I also think brain retraining is just I don't know, I'm like, where it's just sometimes I think neurological and matters of the mind, people attach labels that somehow stretch what is actually happening. Anyway, that's another discussion. I was doing a lot of these, I was using a lot of these tools in my life anyway, because
Mm-hmm.
and I hate saying this and I hate that this context even exists actually. I hate saying that I have had trauma in my life. I had a difficult childhood. I have gone through a lot of trauma. My mother, saying this on a YouTube video, but whatever, my mother is severely mentally ill, and I experienced pretty disturbing situations throughout my life because of that. And so as a result, I've used a lot of these tools before to deal with those experiences throughout my life, I guess. And when I got COVID, I actually felt strangely enough, I was very mentally stable, and I felt healed. Like, I felt quite well. I know that might sound, there's probably someone listening to this who might assume that I wasn't, but I felt quite well. And I've had a few different rounds of therapy before for the trauma I've experienced, and I had a therapist who specializes in trauma, and he discharged me even after I got sick. By the way, I was seeing him when I got COVID, and he discharged me because he was like, "You're fine, like, you're good. You're physically sick, but other than that, you're okay. Actually, there's nothing, like, I don't know what else we should do, because you're already pretty good at regulating yourself. You know how to." I know a lot of people who go through this, the symptoms and that experience really terrifies them, and it makes you feel worse when you're already terrified, But I was already pretty good at regulating myself. So when I see some discussions where people are like, it's about the fear, you just need to like calm down the fear. I'm like, but what about me? Well, I don't, the only thing I'm afraid of is being stuck in this situation forever and always having to deal with PEM, but it's not like it's not like I live my life or do things constantly like panic that I'm going to have post-exertional malaise. When I got COVID, I was like, I was like, yeah, it's going to be okay. I was telling myself I'd be okay. I would write on paper with both sides of my hands, by the way, because this is apparently good for doing like brain neuro rehab, even like writing I am healing with my right hand and then writing I am healing with my left hand and keeping myself calm. And I still developed long COVID. So, and there are other people I've talked to, like in the same situation where they were all about this lifestyle prior to getting sick, really believing in these concepts. And I still think these concepts can be useful in some ways. But when I see them framed like this is definitely going to help you, and if it doesn't, there's this framing that you're somehow doing something wrong, or, I've seen people who coach and sell these programs say things like, once upon a time, I wasn't ready to heal either. It's just, I don't know. It comes across, look, I don't want to say they have malicious intent. Perhaps that's a bit too harsh. I believe a lot of them are genuinely trying to help people, but I think it can be harmful and make people feel like they're failing, that they're not doing enough. It can even backfire and get people into more perfectionist mind frames. Like when I was reading what is it called? The Secret Language of the Body or something. Sorry if I'm misquoting the title of the book I downloaded like 2 days ago. I can also see how it could trigger people into getting to a more of a perfectionist spiral, actually, and destabilizing their mental health even more. So, yeah, and when I think of some of my friends who are like mentally the most zen people I've ever met in my life, but then they're still profoundly unwell, it just feels, I guess I would feel differently if some of these people were also advocating for more biomedical research and not just saying this is the solution for your health, and I don't see them doing any other kind of advocating, that it doesn't sit right with me, I guess.
For sure.
Sorry for a very long answer, by the way.
No, I hear what you're saying. For sure. I think it's a valid point. So I'd push back on a couple of things. So I think we can talk about the techniques and all of this kind of stuff and how that relates to in a sec. But it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that your main frustration with it is not people sharing what has helped, things that have been useful to them personally, and then people can take from that what they will. But it's more the fact that people, when they list it as this is the reason that you're not better, or like you should do this, otherwise you're not ready to get better, etc. Is that right?
Yeah, just like I said, it's the framing. I don't think like a lot of those techniques can be useful if you are. I mean, I think going through something like this is definitely very mentally disturbing. I mean, like I said, I'm pretty, considering everything I've been through in my life, considering the circumstances of my life right now, considering how much this is stressing out my husband, considering the fact I'm from Australia and I haven't been home for over 4.5 years. I think I'm doing okay. I've started this project that I was offered a grant for despite being incredibly unwell. Like I wouldn't be able to do all those things if I was where I was mentally at, say, in my early 20s. It would not have been possible. I was still in so much constant stress and just, I didn't have like tools to regulate myself at all. And I'd been through a lot of awful things, it just like the way it's framed, and I think, sorry, what I want to say is I think these tools definitely helped me with certain aspects of my mental health, maybe even how that affected my physical health, because I'm not saying it's not connected. Chronic stress is bad for all diseases. Like when I had myocarditis, the doctors, when I was discharged from the hospital, were like, you can't get stressed. You have to defer your university semester. Like, don't let your parents stress you out. You have to be as calm as possible. The difference is they weren't then saying, yeah, so because you might benefit from therapy right now, that means this is all psychosocial, however it's described. It's psychosomatic. Every disease can benefit from the person impacted getting some kind of mental health support as well, or finding other ways to, you know, stay grounded and not be overcome with, as the people often pushing these programs suggest, fear. But
Yeah.
the lack of, again, just the way it's framed, not advocating, not like always adding disclaimers. By the way, there are people who are profoundly sick who this might not help at all, and we need more research. Just I'm missing those disclaimers, you know, just that there's just context and further elaboration missing. It's frustrating.
Sure. So a couple of things. So firstly, on the disclaimer stuff, I totally agree. I think firstly, regardless of what you're talking about and what things have helped you and what has improved, the push should always be for more research and more knowledge and more awareness, etc. as well. And I think that is something that is so important to do conjunctively. Because if I take my channel, what I'm trying to do, right? So on the one hand, I want to raise awareness and push for more research and push for more understanding of this illness, because that's exactly what we need, and that is well worth our time. On the other hand, I want to share and empower people and make people feel as though there is things that they can do, and they have some degree of agency of what might help them. And this is the thing when it comes to messaging, because think how when you have this kind of messaging, when you see people, these self-help gurus online, and they say, you should eat this every morning for breakfast because this will help you become the best version, etc., etc. What do you mean? Why should I? What do you mean I should? You're prescribing something for me based on some kind of ideal that you have. But if you switch up that messaging, you say, I like to eat XYZ for breakfast and it really helps me. Take from that what you will. That is a completely different way of framing the problem, and that's how I like to talk about it as well. And in my defense, I think I do, because from the point of view of saying, because I'm being honest, I've been doing the brain retraining type techniques, and that has been, for me, in my opinion, the single biggest needle mover for improving my symptoms. And I'm incredibly blessed that I've been in a good level of health, and that my symptoms weren't actually at the severe end of ME, but I still think that massively impacted me in a positive way. And that's why I say, this is what I did, this is how I did it, you might get some benefit from this as well, but not you. The only reason you're not getting better is because you're not doing that. And I think that's a very simple way of just changing how things are framed. And I think that also stops people from then having that pressure and stress on them as well. It's like if I said to you, Sophie, the only reason you're not recovering is you're not doing a ketogenic diet. You'll be like, whoa, Harry, shut the fuck up. Why are you telling me that? Like, you're not, who are you to say? Who are you to say that? Whereas if I said to you, hey, Sophie, I've actually been trying a ketogenic diet. For me, it's actually massively helped me. I see a massive improvement in my symptoms. Maybe you want to try it as well. Maybe help you, maybe not. So I think that's the first thing. When it comes to the actual techniques and so on themselves, I know you've spoken about, mental health regulation, therapy, getting yourself in a good space. I completely understand all of that stuff. The thing I would push back on is saying that the techniques involved in this kind of brain training, whatever you want to call it. So, for example, one of them is this somatic tracking technique. So they use it in chronic pain reprocessing therapy. It's actually been proven to be incredibly effective in that for chronic back pain, which understandably is a different thing, right? But this is just in terms of how it works. But there is that kind of initial idea of, okay, let's intellectualize what that means to do somatic tracking, as in we sit there, we observe the symptoms, we observe the sensations that come up, we observe what's going on, and intellectually I need to not be afraid of them, I need to not be aware, and that will help my body to relax and return to some kind of baseline, right? So there's that kind of intellectual understanding, a bit like an intellectual understanding of what it means to meditate and why it'd be beneficial. And most people would understand why meditation would be beneficial, why there's that kind of, you have that separate sense of self that develops, etc. But then there is a further understanding when you actually do those techniques that can't necessarily be explained, where you're not necessarily fearful, but through doing the somatic tracking and doing these techniques, much like they do in the chronic back pain study, your body and mind subconsciously becomes aware of being exposed to those sensations and having less of a reaction to them. And again, I'm not saying that there will, there might be things going on. I've talked about the plentiful buckets of evidence of what is potentially going on in long COVID, whether it's microclotting, autoimmunity, viral persistence, blah, 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 blah. But if we can change the evoked pain response activity in our brain, which studies have shown happens when you enact these techniques, my opinion is surely that is only a good thing. Like regardless of what is going on, like let's say for example there is viral persistence or there's autoimmunity, microclotting, whatever.
I mean, I think viral persistence has been proven pretty like it's been proven for sure by now, right?
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. But let's say all of those things are driving that. If we can change how the evoked sensitivity and hyperarousal in areas of our brain receive and react subconsciously to those sensations that are going on in our body, surely that can only be a good thing, right?
I don't think, like I said, I don't think it's a bad thing per se. I think the way it's framed can be harmful. I think neglecting to advocate for research is a bit, I'm not the biggest fan of this approach personally. It feels a bit, I don't know, like if you really care about everyone and everyone getting help, I would just like to see some of those people selling those programs also talk about research for all the people who aren't getting better. And I'd also like to say, because when I talk about this, there are people who are like, but so many of the recovery stories talk about brain retraining. I also know a lot of people who have recovered from long COVID who didn't do any of these things.
For sure.
Some of them had, I also don't want to say that they were doing something wrong, but some of them I know were really, really struggling with the mental health side of this experience because it is a horrible experience. I don't think anyone can sit there and say, yeah, you should be happy the whole time. Like going through this is horrific. How much you're just physically suffering, feeling like you're trapped, and you try to do something you used to take for granted and suddenly you get hit with payback for it for days or weeks later. The isolation, the lack of understanding, the stigmatization, the bullying and harassment when you try to speak up about it, that's not a nice experience. It's understanding that a lot of people would be struggling. And I know some people who've recovered and improved by doing nothing, by being, by handling it horribly, getting in really, really dark spirals, which I've been witness to because I've spoken to some of those people and tried to get them out of those dark spirals because I was worried about them, and they didn't really focus on that part and they still got better. It's just that those people aren't sharing recovery stories. Unfortunately, I often wish they would. I'm like, guys, don't get me wrong, I'm not against hope and I'm happy for everyone who gets better. And God, I hope I just somehow get better as well. That would be incredible. But though a lot of these people just don't come back and leave recovery stories. They don't come back and say, oh, by the way, I got better. How? I don't know. Just enough time went by. I was lucky I didn't have to push myself and eventually I got better. And from what we have seen, there are people who develop chronic infection-associated diseases who do, and we don't exactly know why because research in this area was neglected for so long, who get better. When I was 21, my thyroid was overactive and I took medication for 18 months. And I remember my doctor saying in most cases it will become overactive again. And it never did for me. Do we know why? No, it just never did. It's not because I did something in particular. I just got lucky, I guess.
For sure.
So I think, there are also anyone who's watching who's like, damn, I'm doing this stuff and it's still not helping me. You might just get better eventually anyway. So I don't want anyone to feel like they're not doing enough or it's their fault, basically.
I can really appreciate that, and I appreciate your I think it's really beneficial to hear this other side of things, because your concern, from my understanding, is seeing these people who are there in incredible suffering still, and then on top of that are frustrated the fact that I should be able to get better, I should be doing this, and I'm not seeing any improvement. So I totally see that. And then with people who are coming down to them saying you should be doing this, you should be doing this. I would say though, and this is what I've really wanted to chat, because I think it's so useful that we have this kind of at least understanding and commonality and sort of unity across the kind of different, because I don't think it should be this kind of different side of, oh well, you're not doing this, so you should be getting better. Because I do think we see that on both sides, like you said, with people saying, oh well, the only reason you're not recovering is because you're not doing X. Incredibly unhelpful, incredibly uncompassionate. But then on the other side as well, I've had times where I've posted things on Twitter about, look, I've been doing this, I've been doing this brain training stuff that helps me and has helped me, and put it in a way that is articulated, not you need to be doing this. And the amount of backlash I've received, and people saying you're a grifter, you never had long COVID, I'm a big boy. I can deal with some negativity, but
people have called me a grifter too.
Yeah, but I want there to be this kind of understanding and this kind of realization that by doing that kind of stuff is the exact same thing as the other side. And I think having the good constructive conversations is useful now.
Yeah, I think particularly on Twitter, X, formerly Twitter, whatever you want to call that platform that I immensely despise. I think there are also people who are on Twitter who are very, very unwell for a long time. Some of them are stuff. I mean, I think it's also important to note that there is a certain privilege involved in even being in the position that you can recover, right? There are
first world country, medical help, 100%.
Yeah, and also like supportive family. I know some people who are getting worse because this happens to people who are really young and they're still dependent on their parents, right? And what are you supposed to do in that situation if your parents don't believe you, if they're abusive, if they're forcing you beyond your limits every single day, if they're not taking care of you, if they're not... how do you even have the opportunity to even have the chance to maybe not 100% recover, but even stabilize, even improve at all, not get worse?
Yeah.
It's you can't just tell those people just brain retrain your way out of it, bro. Like it's just,
No, I completely understand. And, there's people who work like manual jobs who can't find something else, and they have a family of 5 that they need to feed. Or, I mean, not even touching upon the people who live in third world countries, the people who live in Sudan who have been displaced, who also probably have long COVID. There's endless amounts of people who will be suffering beyond belief, who do not have the absolute luxury that we have. And there's always going to be people who would die to trade places with you, regardless of how bad your experience it may appear to be. But I think it comes from, certainly from my view, it's this idea of having this compassion, this understanding of what people are going through, and this understanding of suffering, this push for more awareness, for more research, for more work to be done within the area, so that people feel like there is some kind of hope or some kind of answer in the future. But then also, I think it is incredibly important, and certainly for me, it was so incredibly valuable to see and hear of people who have recovered through whatever means, not necessarily brain retraining or whatever it was, but to see some kind of hope and see what they were doing, and then provide some kind of agency for myself. Because I know it, like, I know you spoke about the perfectionist streak, and I definitely felt that come out a little bit when I'm drilling to do all of my recovery checklist every day, right? But I found it also incredibly empowering and incredibly hopeful and beneficial to have a degree of agency, where I thought, okay, this is the situation that I'm in. I can't I can't change what's happened, but I can do some things to try and improve my situation and try and at least control how I react to things as well. And
Yeah.
that's, again, not to say that if you're not doing that, you're useless and your suffering is unworthy. But I personally find that kind of agency and that degree of agency incredibly empowering.
Yeah. I guess for me that agency comes from advocacy. Because like I said, I was, or even the somatic tracking stuff, I've done things like that before, kind of for years already, actually. And it's helpful in a lot of ways, but it didn't prevent me from developing long COVID. And I don't know, I get hope by advocating, and not just, and for me, it's not just about me, it's really for everyone. If this was only happening to me, of course, it would still be horrible and I would hate it, but I don't think I would invest so much effort into trying to raise awareness. I do genuinely care about people. I think it's also because of what I've been through in my life. I think back, if this happened to me as a teenager, I feel like I would be dead by now. Like, my circumstances when I was living at home was so awful that I genuinely like, it genuinely scares me to think of what it would have been like if this had happened 10, 12 years, 15 years prior, which it could have, And I know I would not have been in any position to even improve how much I've improved now, because my circumstances would not have even allowed it to happen, You also need luck, because some people are doing absolutely everything right and they're still horribly unwell. So there's different elements. But knowing what it could have been like, how much worse off I would have been. I mean, my life is already kind of shitty right now, but it could have been so much worse. And knowing that this is going to keep happening to young people, to people who are in potentially awful situations that there's no chance that they can just get out of, where they need hope too. And for me, that hope comes from trying to genuinely improve this situation for everyone. And from my perspective, that's going to come through research, through the next frontiers of medicine, through more investment into complex chronic illnesses, into autoimmune diseases, all these diseases that have been neglected for so long. And I genuinely believe this will be incredibly beneficial for healthcare in general. I think there's going to be a hurdle and a very difficult part, like trying to update the education of healthcare professionals globally is an enormous effort. I think trying to adjust perspectives on the fact that infections aren't always just necessarily these acute things and it's over, that they can impact people for a long time. There are a lot of perspectives through healthcare and society that have to be shifted, and it's not a sprint. I always say this is a marathon, not a sprint. Unfortunately, I wish it was a sprint, but then I would have 10. Sorry. But I think my agency is for myself, and I hope for everyone, is also through advocacy. And even if I got better, and I'm not immune from hoping I get better. I bloody hope I get better. And that's why I still try to eat as healthy as possible. I try to keep myself, I try to not let myself spiral into despair. I try to keep myself grounded. I do my breathing exercises. I take the supplements that seem like they're useful for me. I definitely also hope I get better, but I know that everyone statistically won't get better. And even if that's the minority of people who end up with long COVID, those people still deserve to have dignity through genuine healthcare. So, yeah.
For sure. I totally agree. I think there's it's very nice to see the level of compassion you have for this, and also the care for the work that you're doing as well. So that is something I thoroughly appreciate. I think from speaking, we essentially have like the same North Star, right? There's this thing that we want to see more research. We want to see more progress in this field. and we want to see as many people to have that kind of alleviation to their suffering as well. And I think the important thing is to make sure that when things are being shared, like I've said, like when you're sharing things about what people have done, sharing what's helped, there has to be the caveat, and the way that you articulate it is in the art of the message, right? It's this is what helped me, this might help you as well, as opposed to telling people this is the reason why you're not better, until we understand more, until we get more information there as well. So I appreciate it, Sophie. Thank you so much for your time. Just to finish off, what's next for you and Berlin Buyers Club? What's going on?
Yeah, like I mentioned, we're trying to register BBC as an official nonprofit now, but we live in Germany, so it's surprisingly going to take longer than I hoped. But it's in the process, and hopefully it will be possible.
That German bureaucracy.
Yeah, that German bureaucracy, amazing. We're also, like I said, we just had our first demonstration. We are planning to have 2, I hope 3 more until the end of November. We're planning the next one for the 14th of September. Exact details still to be discussed. And hopefully our petition gets approved so we can engage with politicians more. Yeah, I have a lot of big hopes for Berlin Buyers Club, but we'll see what happens.
Amazing. Well, keep up the fantastic work that you were doing. I thoroughly appreciate you coming on. I thought it was a really, really useful discussion, really interesting. And yeah, I'll add any links that you send over to the comments below, so people can take a look and see what you guys are doing. But yeah, Sophie, thank you so much for your time. Thoroughly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for allowing me to discuss my perspective. I hope it was somewhat interesting for someone out there, and I hope you have a nice afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Stay and hang in there, everyone. Really hang in there. Whatever you're doing, yeah, hang in there. We're gonna get through this somehow.
Appreciate it.